Hi there, I'm Taddes Korris, double bass, performing here at University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I'm giving you an example of the Marcello E minor cello sonata performed on double bass. Hi there, I'm Taddes Korris, double bass, performing here at University of North Carolina at Charlotte. I'm giving you an example of the Marcello E minor cello sonata performed on double bass. With most Baroque music, there's a lot of patterns that recur within the lines. So what we want to try and do is see how we can make these patterns that are quite similar sound different at different times. So throughout the sonata, we've got a motive much like. We want to consider how we can phrase through that and grow, because following that, we've got. So it'd be very boring if we performed it completely flat. It's much more interesting if we can add shape by creating dynamics. So I recommend using a crescendo to grow towards the 16th notes and then to taper away. It's much nicer to have a phrase that kind of rounds itself out. The danger with performing these sonatas on the bass is that they can sound very, very heavy because they're generally a whole octave higher on the cello, so they naturally have a bit more lightness. One thing that I really want to address in this sonata is that it's very notey. There are a lot of running notes and passages, and that can often seem intimidating. So what I want to do is provide a couple of practice strategies that make it easier for you to put the entire piece together, because when you look at a long passage such as this, starting before measure 20, there's a lot of running notes and passages and not a lot of time for rest. The tendency is to want to rush into the music and start jumping into it and just practicing it. And I want to say it's good too to practice these things slowly, but at the same time, as you're practicing something slowly so you get the intonation correct, you also want to practice things quickly so that you can consolidate your fingerings. Now you're going to ask, how can you practice slowly and quickly at the same time? And here's a hint. Of course, you practice slowly first to get the intonation very clear. So say, for example, here in bar 18. You get the intonation correct. And if there's something that doesn't quite sound right, isolate that passage. So say if I went, the C was very flat. So I want to find out, okay, was the C flat or sharp? And what do I need to do to correct it? It happens between the D and the C. So you practice that. It's your first step. Then what you do is the part where you're practicing fast. And you're not practicing fast just by playing the patterns quickly, but what you're doing is you're grouping the notes together. So for instance, in this example, ED, CB, ED, CB, we're going to try two different rhythmic variations. One is short-long, and the other is long-short. Let me demonstrate. And then the other is like that. And what you do is you slowly build group by group. The way I would first start is just to go just one time, and then again. See if you can get it right 3 or 4 times before moving on, and then add the next pattern. And then you can keep adding as you've worked through these. The other thing you can do is then play at tempo or close to at tempo 1/4 notes worth of the music. So patterns like that allow you to slowly break up the music into multiple pieces and then put it back together again. And trust me, I know practicing can be difficult sometimes and it's hard enough already, but what we want to do is make practicing engaging and fun and not daunting, because you see a big piece like this and you want to know the most efficient way that you can learn it so that it's interesting for you, and then you can have more fun performing it. There's one other thing I wanted to address quickly, just about how you can group notes together. Now, depending on the edition, some notes will have slurs, some notes won't. So what you can do is decide, musically speaking, if you think certain passages should be slurred or tied together. Originally, when a lot of these composers wrote this music, they didn't put any of those indications in, and it's up to the editor. So in a way, you can be your own editor and come up with some of the same patterns that you'd like to group. For instance, one of the patterns that recurs in this sonata that is slurred, right here after bar 20, 21, 22, starting on bar 23. I'm going to start at bar 22 to give you an example. You could play those separately. But personally, I like that the editor does this because it adds a nice touch of style to the sonata. The other thing you could do right at the beginning here, as printed in this edition, is another slur. Musically speaking, I liked it without that particular slur in that place, but just know, so long as you are keeping the integrity of the bowing, meaning that notes that are going down on a down bow and notes going up on an up bow are consistent, then you know you can basically follow whatever sort of phrase concept you want. At the same time, you want it to be as regular as possible. Now, the very last thing I'll talk about is this one tricky passage right here. We've got this barred A to D. So whenever you have a note that's considered barred, it's basically that you're using the same finger to play both notes on 2 different strings at the same time, which is difficult. So getting in and out of this passage is one of the trickier things. So what I'm going to do is slowly show you my fingering that I think is a good way for you to get to this spot, and then to practice this bowing pattern. Now, first off, before you even address this, try and work on this bowing without the notes. Try and just play on the open strings. Right. So the key is not so much playing the notes, but it's the stuff between the notes. You'll see on the bow, we have what's called a bow arc. And by adjusting this bow arc, that is the way we go from one string to another. And the idea is you want to minimize this bow arc as much as possible. What I don't want to do is to do something like this. See how much wasted energy I'm using by trying to play it. It's still coming out, but it sounds a little messy. And it's a lot of work. It's physically harder. So what I can do is instead minimize the motion by using much less bow arc. So practice that. Then practice the rhythmic variations I talked about. Short, long, short, and long, short, long, short, long. Right, so now for my fingering pattern to get into there. I'll play it a little more slowly so you can see it and hear it a little clearly. I'm going to start right at this descending scale starting on the high G. So that's a really important thing, going from that B natural to E. So you want to try and minimize the amount of shifts you have from one passage to another, and that's a good way to do it. I hope this was informative and you got some ideas as to how your performance might like to take shape. I'm Taddes Korris, performing at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Happy practicing.